This is my presentation on the Star Wars Marvel UK comics. So we can have a little discussion about these comics, and you could talk about what you like about the comics or don't like about the comics. Feel free to comment, ask questions, chime in anytime. And again, be thinking about what presentation you can present in the future. So this is Star Wars Marvel UK comics. This is an overview of the series. It started publication in February of '78. This is not going to be an exhaustive review or an exhausting review. It just includes some of my favorite covers and some brief rundowns of the main issues and some of the features that were kind of exclusive to the UK publications of Star Wars comics by Marvel in the UK. So I found out about these sort of alternative comics through this particular issue of Star Wars back in, I don't know when I got this comic, quite honestly. It could have been around 83, 82 or something like that when I found it in a flea market shop in Fredericksburg or something like that. On the back pages of this is just the regular issue 42 from here in America. But in the back pages of it, they had a whole little article about the UK comics, and they showed all the different covers that they had. And so that just sort of brought my attention to them. And I think maybe in another letter page later on, people asked how they could get these comics, because somebody found out that there were a few additional stories that weren't being published here in America. And that's where I found out about 4 New Adventures in Full Color and World of Fire. So within these 2 novel-sized books that were actually published here in America are several, but not all, of the stories that were published in the UK but not published here. So they were first mentioned in a US letter pages in response to a query about how to get these things. So 4 New Adventures includes Way of the Wookiee, which is sort of an early look at Chewbacca's home planet, in which, of course, as usual, Chewbacca gets shot or hurt or injured so everybody else can live to fight another day. Then there's Weapons Master, which is tells the story of how Leia became such a great shot. And then there's Day After the Death Star, that sort of shows what happened with Luke after the ceremony that we saw at the end of episode 4. And then there's the conclusion of the Pizzazz story, World of Ice. The Pizzazz magazine featured some 2-page comic strips every month, Star Wars comic strips, and it ended publication too quickly for them to finish the final story. So the final pages were published here in 4 New Adventures in Color. Is that showing up? Oh, it doesn't even, oh, there it is. Yeah, 4 New Adventures in Color. And then here, World of Fire. So this is in color. World of Fire here is in black and white. And it's one single story about Luke and Leia and this disposable girl named Mickey, who crash land on a lava planet and get buried beneath hardened lava and try to find their way out. So those were the and it took me forever to find. I think I didn't find this one. I didn't find 4 New Adventures until eBay came along. That's how hard that one was for me to find. This one I found it, the World of Fire, I found in a comic shop very early on. Then later on, Dark Horse did a few more of the fill-in stories. So they had this 2-issue series called Devil Worlds that featured stories by Alan Moore. I don't know if that means anything, but everybody talks about Alan Moore. Does anybody know who Alan Moore? I know you know who he is, Jeff, and you know who he is. He's, I guess, a British writer who's done everything. Judge Dredd, Watchmen. Okay, so these were some of his earlier. I think he did about four stories, 4 single stories, maybe about 10 to 12 pages each, and so that's what Dark Horse did. They took the 8 of the 9 stories that were done by Alan Moore and some other writers and artists and combined them into Devil Worlds in 1996. So the first issue of Star Wars was published February 8th, 1978, or for the week of February 8th, 1978. It premiered in England December 27th of 1977. All the issues are about 8.5 by 11, so sort of magazine size. They're all in black and white with gray scaling, and they include backup stories in there. So the Warlock, Guardians of the Galaxy, Tales of the Galaxy, those were some of the names of the titles that were backup stories. So they would have about 10 or 12 pages of Star Wars, and then about 10 or 12 pages of a backup story, and then a few other pages of ads and puzzles and that sort of thing in each issue. Each American issue was broken up into 2 issues, basically broken up into 2 issues over there in the UK. Particularly early on, that was pretty much the way it went. Later on, they started stretching it out a little bit more. So here are some of the other issues. They were obviously more prepared for Star Wars success. So there's contests in many of the issues. You could win puzzles, watches, Super 8 reels. The covers featured, a lot of them featured all new art. They were recolored and redesigned artwork from the existing American issues. So you can see, these 2 here on the left, that's all new art. And then over here is sort of recolored art from that was used here in America. Once again, you get into these kind of oddball things, like these sort of collage covers. Excuse me, let me go back. Many of these alternate covers were drawn by Tony DeZuniga, who also drew covers for American Star Wars publications like the oversized Treasury editions. The covers of those were handled by DeZuniga. He was one of the first Filipino comic artists that started coming over in the early 60s. And he co-created Jonah Hex and worked on a graphic novel coinciding with the film Jonah Hex, which was fairly recent, as I recall. He also went on to illustrate Dungeons and Dragon publications and later became a conceptual designer for Sega in the late 80s. He died in 2012. But he did a lot of these covers that we don't see over here very often. He did some pinups. We'll get to those in a little while. Just some unusual artwork that we just didn't see over here.
Is the weekly thing like a UK thing?
That's right. So they came out every week over there.
But is that like did other European countries kind of do it that way? That you know of?
Not that I know of. In fact, like Michael brought some and Jeff brought some that where it combines even more. So each issue was thicker and contained more content than the British stuff.
Do you have that cutout TIE fighter from that one?
I'm getting there.
Oh, okay.
I'm getting there.
So the Star Wars logo on these, all the letters have been altered somewhat. So is that these are considered bootleg?
No, these are all published by Marvel UK.
I think that's why Marvel did them.
Yeah. Well, they are a little more stretched out. It's a little more angular. S's.
Every letter has an alteration.
Yeah, that's a little bit different from ours. Yeah, it is definitely a different, slightly different variation on the logo. Yeah. Another regular contributor to the covers and fill-in art was Howard Bender. So he did the 2 here on the right, the one in the middle. These are 2 of my favorite ones here. He worked on Superman comics later, Richie Rich, and Filmation's Ghostbusters comic. He currently lives, get this, in Ocean City, New Jersey, where he works as a caricature artist. You can go online and ask him to do your caricature. But so the thing about these comics, really, from my perspective, that I like about them is that, yes, there are those few issues that weren't published over here originally, but it's the sort of it's these alternate covers. That's what because everything else is pretty much the same, except it's in black and white. The other stuff in there are a few pinup things, or these funny little contests, but beyond that, it's really about the covers for me. That's what I really like about them. So that's what I'm kind of showing everybody today. It's just sort of my favorite covers. And yeah. So next up, it continued reprinting the comic stories published by Marvel in mid-77, starting with the 7 Samurai Magnificent 7 pastiche, the Aduba 3 arc, Han and Chewie find a poor farm besieged by the villainous Sergi X Arrogantis and his gang of cloud riders who burns crops and steals women. And Han and Chewie put together a ragtag group of misfit heroes to take on Sergi and his crew, culminating in the awakening of an ancient dormant dragon beast with a laser blaster horn. So again, this is over here on the side. This is sort of these floating heads are kind of a common theme over there on a lot of these British comics that I've seen over the years. They just these heads, and it kind of goes along with early Beatles and early pop records over there, where you just used to see all just heads, no context for these characters at all, just heads, no context for the singers, just heads. And it wasn't really until the Beatles that they started showing them, putting them in context, and started to move away from that sort of marketing trope of floating heads. But so that's the very first one. That includes they included a little mini poster, and I'll talk more about these things later. And of course, like I said, this is sort of the one we're used to seeing, but it actually includes portions of the first issue 7 broken up. These two include portions of issue 7 broken up, and then it moves on to issue 8 here in the bar. You see Chewbacca enraged with his gigantic toes. Here's again more floating heads. Okay. So they continued reprinting the comic stories. Yes, okay. And this is kind of a cool one here. It's got Han wielding a lightsaber that he got from the slain Jedi Knight Don Juan Quixote. Yep. So that's a funny thing. Are you all familiar with those issues and those character names and the stories kind of behind that? Roy Thomas. So Roy Thomas wrote these, like, he thought having a character like Jackson, the Green Rabbit, was no more absurd than Chewbacca. He kind of put them in the same category of a level of absurdity. It's like, well, if you're going to have a hairy dog or an ape flying your plane, why not just how is a green rabbit more absurd? You know, you be the judge. But that was sort of his idea. And then he just went, actually, he didn't go too far afield from Lucas too, because he was sort of touching on the Seven Samurai and the Magnificent Seven stories to tell this particular story. So whereas Lucas went to, what was it, the Hidden Fortress as an inspiration, as one of the inspirations for Star Wars. So he thought he was on the right track. So next up is the Drexel arc, in which Luke and the droids crash land on an ocean-covered planet while they are in search of a new rebel base. Leia goes to rescue them, but she crashes too, unaware that their shipwrecks are caused by the Dragon Lords lurking underneath this ocean planet surface. So here you got funny guys like Governor Quarg here, kind of pirate type characters, and then under the sea are these sort of scientists, and they're luring ships in so that they can take the parts and build a ship to get off the planet. That's sort of their rationale. They have some really funny names of each of these individual issues, like one of them is Should the Governor Cry Death, and the other one is The Madness of Quarg. Just some quirky British titles for some of these chapters within the issues. Next up is the Wheel arc, in which Luke falls into his first forced trance. The other heroes try to rush him to the nearest medical facility, which just so happens to be a gambler's space station known as the Wheel. The Wheel administrator is a guy called Simon Greyshade. He's a former member of the Imperial Senate who took a shine to Leia in their senatorial days. He forces Han and Chewbacca to participate in gladiator battles to force Leia into accepting him as her husband or lover or boyfriend or some such arrangement. There's Simon Greyshade right there. After escaping Drexel, they wind up going to the Wheel. Luke has succumbed to a forced trance and spends some time dream fighting with Darth Vader, while Leia rebuffs the advances of Simon Greyshade, and Han and Chewie participate in the gladiator battle to the death. So Luke not being allowed to fight Vader was part of Lucasfilm's restrictions on Marvel, resulting in the duels being in dreams or other sort of trickery that we'll see later on. But they could at least put them together on a cover to make you think that they were fighting. There's Darth Vader and Strom. Okay, Strom is a bald Imperial general, sort of a disposable general that is working between Vader and Gray Shade. They basically fall apart there at the end. Issue 48 through 50. These two here. This is a reprinting of the first 9 Pizzazz strips. Here, so this gives you an idea of what the insides of them look like. You can see the grayscaling here. There's Strom right there. They had little articles in there with interviews with actors, news on the upcoming sequel, contest prizes. It sort of made the weekly into a veritable fan club magazine for young British Star Wars fans. This is the end of, I think this is one of the Alan Moore type stories here with the Keeper. And then this is the first photo cover for one of their weeklies. This was issue 50. They finally did a photo cover. Backwards, yeah, that's right. So yeah, then they get back into the main storyline that we saw over here. Luke and Leia flee separately in Gray Shade's space yacht while Chewie and Han break away from the wheel aboard the Falcon. Luke and Leia ditch Gray Shade's ship at a used starship dealer in exchange for a freighter with a similar design to the Blockade Runner, an early Blockade Runner. They return to the 4th moon of Yavin to find the rebel base under siege by the brothers Tag, who have developed a giant turbine that they have hidden from the rebels in the red gas storms of Yavin. From that secret location, they launch hit-and-run TIE fighter raids on the rebels and escape without a trace. Ultimately, Luke is able to destroy the turbine and escape the blinding gas storms using the Force. And then it goes right back into these two here are the beginning of that story with the Yavin and the gas turbine thing. And then here you jump back into the Pizzazz stories, because now they're back into the World of Ice story. So they bounce around a lot. And now here we are back again with Baron Tag, and then back again to the World of Ice story. So it really bounced around a lot. And I think one thing I read was that they always had to wait for the printing plates to come from the US over to the UK. So that was another reason that they would fall behind and need these filler stories. I don't know how true that is, but that's one thing that I did read. 57 through 59, reprint the War on Ice storyline, originally published in issues 10 through 16 in the US, but never finished because Pizzazz was canceled. Only UK readers would know the ending until the 4 New Adventures was published. Issue 61 features the return of Valance, the cyborg bounty hunter, who was introduced in issue 30 of the weekly series. The Valance stories would continue occasionally, and in these stories, Valance wants to kill Luke to keep Vader from getting to him as a matter of revenge for Vader causing Valance's deformities. Valance, as you may know, was a bounty hunter who was a cyborg, very much half man, half robot, like literally right down the middle, half man, half robot. And he hates droids because he is half droid, so he's self-loathing. So Valance is stymied by C-3PO eventually, whose devotion to Luke Skywalker scrambles Valance's mind, and as he attempts to kill Luke, 3PO stands in between, and Valance crumbles upon the realization that Luke is friends with a droid and perhaps sees a future for himself. Back to Han and Chewie, who have set the Falcon down for repairs only to be found by Jabba the Hutt. You see Jabba pictured in here? That's Jabba right there. That's Jabba the Hutt right there.
We don't see your cursor. Yeah, we don't.
Oh, sorry. Oh, you don't see the cursor? Oh, there it is. Right there. Right there.
That's true.
That's Jabba the Hutt. So they used, as far as I can tell, they used one of the background characters who is now known as Mosep Benid as a fill-in for Jabba the Hutt, not even the big guy from the hangar bay. They used that version of Jabba, the sort of Mosep Benid design as Jabba whenever he was featured in the early comics here in the US and in the UK. So they sat down in a cave, and they realized that the cave is infested by metal-eating termites. And when Jabba realizes his ship is also being consumed, he renegotiates the price on Han Solo's head and cancels his debt temporarily. Vader takes on the droid-hating Valance again, whose change of heart after talking to C-3PO made Valance decide not to tell Vader who destroyed the Death Star, so Vader kicks Valance into a lava pit during their final showdown, and that's shown here in these issues here. This particular issue was later used for issue 108 a few years back. Valance did return, actually, in issue 108. That was sort of a follow-up to all of the Marvel issues here in the US. After Marvel got the license back, they did one more issue on that's the old original Star Wars storyline, and they brought back Valance for that particular issue, and they used this center cover for that, which was kind of neat. All right. If anybody is easily offended or yeah, so you might want to avert your glance now, because it's going to get hot in here. It's going to get hot. There we go. This is a one shot of Princess Leia adventure that was originally published in the US as issue 30, called A Princess Alone. You see she's very curvy and very endowed and wearing tight fitting clothing, and she goes to a prison planet to try to sow rebellion in the hearts and minds of the prisoners. That's her mission there, in a very tight-fitting prison costume. So back to the main storyline again. It's the Tag storyline, the brothers Tag. The Tags, you may remember, were mentioned as characters in the original Star Wars movie. It was a General Tag. So he has his brother, who is Baron Ormond Tag, and then he has another brother who is Silas Tag, who is the scientist who came up with all these grand schemes to destroy the rebels and curry favor with the Emperor and discredit Darth Vader. So their next little scheme is a freezing machine technology called the Omega Effect, capable of rendering Tatooine a frozen wasteland. So they're doing experiments on Tatooine, of course. This series is notable for having C-3PO jumpstart a land speeder with his lubricant. Chewie is piloting a Jawa sandcrawler, and it also features the first appearance of the Imperial troop transport right over there, which was pretty neat. Yeah, he uses his fluid. Literally, I guess as they were leaving, somebody shot the oil tank, and it leaked all the oil out. So there's a little line in the desert of oil, and so C-3PO graciously offered the use of his lubricant, because it's the same lubricant in the land speeder, of course. So he was able to plug into the land speeder, shoot his lube in there. I didn't make it up. I'm telling you, this is what they did. So Luke dual tag using the Force. Okay, so he's able to slice to get away from the tags there. They have a duel, and he slices this Baron Tag here. As you can see, he's got these funny looking glasses on in the middle, and he's blind. And so Luke expertly slices those things off to escape the tags on Tatooine. And then Silas went mad after that, and Luke and Han and Chewie and the droids went back to rejoin the rebels. Vader finally does discover the identity of the guy who destroyed the Death Star and ultimately enlists the help of Sister Domina Tag to lure Luke to Monastery, where Vader tricks Luke into dueling Domina's brother, Baron Orman Tag. So, yes, this is in the center there. That's Domina Tag, the fourth character, fourth sibling in the Tag line. And let me ask you this. So what does everybody think of Carmine Infantino's art? So Carmine he did the interior artwork. That's sort of what his artwork looked like inside. To me, I always thought it looked like Batman art. Anybody have any thoughts on good, bad, and different? You're looking at me quizzically like.
It's like,
I just remember being disappointed the characters didn't look like.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And he always had them with weird, funny hand gestures, like that, you know. Very, very strange hand gestures. Nobody else has a thought on Carmine's art? Okay. Oh, well, wait a second, Matt. I do have a leggy little shot of Princess Leia in there. A leggy, busty shot there, kind of behind. So you got that. Moving on. Vader finds that out. So they're on Monastery. Vader tricks Luke into dueling Orman Tag. Luke wins the duel with Darth Vader, but not Darth Vader. So he fights another apparition or clone of Darth Vader, not a clone of Darth Vader, but a stand-in who is actually Baron Orman Tag. And Luke defeats him in a crystal stalagmite forest. After which they had to put in a few more filler issues, including Day After the Death Star, in which Leia and Han and Luke get drunk and she makes out with both of them. And serious. I don't have the picture in here. I intended to put the picture in as a little joke.
at the same time?
Yeah.
I looked out.
Yeah. No, not at the same time. Different panels. And here we go. Here's once again Chewbacca getting blasted by Han Solo as a means of tricking people or escaping. This is the first appearance of the Wookiee planet. I don't really know how to pronounce that. Kashyyyk. I guess it's Kashyyyk. And we see Chewbacca and his family for the first time in the comic books. Once again, getting back into the floating heads over there on the right-hand side. Like I said, that's just a funny little thing that they did a lot over there in England. Another UK only one shot, the Weapons Master over here, these two on the left, tells the story of how Princess Leia became such a great shot, that bald guy behind her. In the middle there, that's the Weapons Master who turned out to be an Imperial spy, of course. And then we move into the larger World of Fire arc in which Luke and Leia and Mickey crash land on the molten lava planet, and they're buried under hardened magma. And to escape the magma, they have to work with their Imperial harassers, only to learn about a massive monster hidden in the planet core. This story ran from issue 107 through 115, and then, like I said before, it would be reprinted in the U.S. by Marvel Books in the novel-sized World of Fire in October of 1982. So you can see here, they're splashing down in the lava. They get buried. They're trying to dig their way out, but they get caught by Imperials and they fight. And then they get caught up with this monster who is apparently, from as far as I can tell, female.
how could you tell?
Yeah, just saying, it just looks like she might be female. After a reprint of the U.S. filler issue, Riders in the Void, featuring art by Michael Golden, 118 sees the start of the much anticipated adaptation of The Empire Strikes Back. It became titled The Empire Strikes Back Weekly after the film's release in May 20th of 1980, continued as a weekly, required the creation of additional cover art, this time drawn by Carmine Infantino. So again, these were the first things that I saw, like this issue here of Luke jumping into the snow speeder. These were the first, these were the things that were pictured in the back of that US issue that kind of piqued my interest. And again, they use some of the US art, but then they get into this filler art with Carmine Infantino covers. There's a few more, and then they collage covers are also, you'll start to see more collage covers coming as this moves along. Some strange stuff here. I think this middle cover, I think those were all drawn by Carmine Infantino, but they were based on Al Williamson's original art. So you see the kind of early version of Yoda there with the sort of fatter face, and all of these poses and situations of the characters in that middle picture were actually drawn by Al Williamson, but redrawn by Carmine Infantino. So unusual in that respect. There's that. This one on the left here, that's a pretty cool, and that's just one panel within the adaptation drawn by Al Williamson, but they put it on the cover, which I thought was a pretty neat cover. The one here on the right with Luke fighting Lando, that's a Carmine Infantino cover. Kind of pretty good one from him. So one thing, I don't know if you all noticed, but up at the top, you'll see a lot of names written on the top right corners of a bunch of these. Here on the top right corner of these two issues, you see somebody writes their names. So apparently, from what I can tell, is that kids were able to subscribe to their favorite comics at local drugstores or newsstands or wherever comics were sold at that time in the UK, and the sellers would note the name of the subscriber on top of each issue. So my experience with them, and you might also note, if you look up at the top, they all kind of have a similar light interference at the top of each issue. All these comics are, at least mine anyway, and I don't think I'm that alone in this respect, are very delicate. Like when I would take them out, they just always felt like they were going to fall apart. And it's really, I found it really hard to find really good, nice, clean, crisp copies of any of these comics. I just couldn't. I found decent ones. Most of mine are pretty decent. I've managed to upgrade some over the years, but they're just very thin paper, very thin paper. The covers in particular are very thin and flimsy. The pages inside are just, the acidy paper and just break down. So they're very brittle, very delicate comics. So I wound up just like setting them up and taking the picture, but of course the light shines right down on top. So that's why you have that little up there in the corners there, or in the top left hand, you see that little light thing there. So sorry about that, but two issues from Argyle Banking Planet, featuring Princess Leia taking on a variety of Universal monsters style villains. See some Frankenstein. There's a sort of vampire character in there, and all kinds of strange little things. The next one over on the far right is one of the more popular U.S. comics, The Last Jedi. This was our number 49 here in the U.S. The U.S. printing was universally muddy. They're just all the printing process. I don't know why. It's just very muddy, but it's neat to see this just in glorious black and white with no muddy coloring in it. There's the second half on the left there. That's the second half of The Last Jedi. And then these other two here in the middle and the right, 143 and 144, they're repurposed stories from John Carter, Warlord of Mars, written by Chris Claremont, penciled by Carmine Infantino, and inked by Tom Palmer. These might be the first Tom Palmer issues that he was involved with. There may have been one or two one-off issues earlier on, but he became he was definitely the most commonly used inker for the whole run of Star Wars, was Tom Palmer. I know that because his name is Tom, and that meant something to me when I was a little kid. Like, oh, there's a guy named Tom in here. So this is here. This might be the final spate of filler comics. That included The Pandora Effect, these are the ones that included a lot of the Alan Moore things. The Pandora Effect, Dark Lord's Conscience, Telotny Throws a Shape, and Death Mask. Once again, to keep up with the relatively slow pace of U.S. comic publishing, or if the printing plates weren't received from the U.S. in time, the U.K. editors had to create filler stories and commissioned Alan Moore, among others, to write a few fill-in stories. They didn't fit into the then current storyline or any other storyline. They fell way outside of any Star Wars continuity. These particular Devil Worlds issues, many of them can be read as sort of like hallucinogenic fever dreams if you want to read them that way. Luke and Han and even Darth Vader. These 9 stories were later republished in '96 when Dark Horse published 8 out of the 9 stories. Death Mask, this story here, was not published at that time. I have no reason why that happened. I have no idea why, but this particular issue was not reprinted by Dark Horse here in the US at that time. And you can see in here just kind of what happens, get an idea of it. Luke's just having these weird dreams, basically, right? Where people are melting in front of his face. They're melting off, and I don't know. I don't know what's going on in there. And to be honest with you, I thought I'd reread them so I could tell you what's going on, but I lost interest very quickly. So again, it's the covers that I like, guys. But this gives you an idea of sort of what they're like. I mean, here's Luke's getting attacked by a big king crab and a jellyfish, and this thing over here kind of looks like this thing here looks like a Nexu to me. Maybe somebody thought that. So meanwhile, he's having these sort of fever dreams while he's practicing his lightsaber, right? Aboard his X-Wing fighter. Okay, so they kind of got it a little wrong there. So I kind of think these issues in particular have more in common with sort of old sci-fi and horror comics in the style of writing, in the style of art, than they really do with Star Wars. But they're little curiosities. After the Pandora Effect, they got back into the main U.S. storyline involving Lando's return to Cloud City, where he's met by the haywire Lobot. There's one last spin through the Devil World story right here on the far right-hand side. And if you look in the back there, you can see a strange, let's see, where's my cursor here, a strange little mask behind Han Solo. Can't quite, you can kind of see it there. It's not very well. So in this story, it's an origin story. It involves Han and Lando working on behalf of the Rebel Alliance, and the two are trying to steal a prototype of the Millennium brand ship. So the prototype was supposed to replace the Millennium Hawk, which has a similar design to the Star Destroyer. The prototype that they're trying to steal is faster and more agile than the other ships, and is, of course, the Millennium Falcon. That's right. So that's like I said, the photo collage covers become a little more common. They also, at this point, at this point here, I think this is issue 159. Yeah, 159. They changed the title to just Star Wars. They include a few more color pages in there. They start to include complete issues of the U.S. issues. So it's not a weekly anymore. It becomes a monthly. They include all of the U.S. issues in that. And then occasionally they have a little backup story in there as well. Here we have painted covers by a guy called John Higgins. And he would do a number of painted covers during this particular period. Here's a few more. Mike, you might like that one. I'm glad you showed up today. So he does these painted covers up until the final issue here, up until issue 171, right here with Luke on the cover. So they kind of stop at the point where Luke and Lando are trying to rescue Han Solo on the planet Stenos, who's, he's in carbonite. So they're chasing after someone in carbonite on the planet Stenos. After this, it becomes retitled Return of the Jedi. It restarts with issue 1. The whole book takes on a decidedly more child-friendly approach with more contests, more puzzles, more giveaways, and a strange little editor droid character who introduces each chapter of the book and answers the letters. His name is Cyril, Cyril, which stands for, if you're writing it down, there'll be a quiz at the end, Class Y Reader's Inquiry Logistical Robot, Cyril. That Return of the Jedi title ran for 155 issues. And I don't have any of those. So one of the cool things about them where they would occasionally include some little punch out or little inserts. And Punch Out and Make It were all the rage back there in the 70s. And this one with the X-Wing came from issue 1. And the one with the TIE Fighter comes with issue 2. And like many other things associated with these comics, they're very fragile, or at least mine are, and very hard to, keep together. So I pulled them out to take these pictures, and they just started, like, I could just feel them popping out, particularly the TIE Fighter. The wing is just wanting to pop out of the page there. So that's pretty neat. Next, Jonathan has this with him today. Tiny little Letraset sheet that was included with the first issue of the Empire Strikes Back Weekly. It is tiny. It's about 2 inches by 3 inches. So you're seeing it here in glorious life, larger than life size. This is pretty neat. You kind of got an early Macquarie version of Yoda here. Jonathan has a few more back there of these Letrasets, which have, I've never even seen them before. It has images from the covers of the Star Wars comics pulled out, so each individual character has been sort of separated and put into a Letraset, which is pretty neat, I think. So that was another little insert for them. And then
Now, those only came with that comic?
it only came with that one comic.
And why is it, did Kraft Foods make the comics?
No, Kraft Food, I guess they got them from Kraft Food to insert into it, but the comics were
So
published.
they were also in that?
Yeah,
Okay.
so,
Yeah.
but there were a couple versions, so then I don't have the bottom to this, there were 4 different bottoms corresponding to the 4 different scenes, so that's why they're tiny, because you
So they would
could
fit in
run
there.
to a scene that was like half the size of the back of the box, or the inside of the box, whatever.
That's interesting, yeah. So did that Dagobah one, was that included in the Dairy
I
Lee
think
stuff?
I don't know, but I think you probably could have got that, but
Okay. To my knowledge, this is the only one that was included with the comic, was
I
that,
think so.
yeah. Yeah.
And that one does seem to be more common,
Yeah.
not that any of that. Or complete.
Actually, this is one that I have that's, so that, again, this is in pretty good shape here. These were the weekly ones. I got this from a guy actually on Facebook, a guy named John Baldwin. So I was able to get a really nice, clean copy of the comic itself and the Letraset. So that was really neat. That was just a few years ago I got this. And then moving on to the posters. So there were a few posters that were included. Mostly they were stapled into the issues. So like the Han and Chewbacca one here was stapled in. And most of them were either just common pictures that we've seen a million times or sort of variations on these. So like the Han and Chewbacca, that's kind of an unusual turn or angle for that particular shot. We're used to seeing a puzzle or something like that from that same shoot, I suppose. This one here is a huge surprise to me. So the issue that it came with here on the right-hand side, I initially had that, and it was one of the worst comics that were just in the worst shape. It was literally just torn up and just a horrible condition. So I was always trying to upgrade that. And I wound up going on eBay, again, just a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago or something like that, and went on eBay, went to Intergalactic Trading site. They actually had some of the UK Star Wars comics there. They had this particular issue in excellent condition, and it said that it didn't include any of the inserts or anything like that, but it did. It included this particular insert right here, which was double the size of the comic. It was painted by John Higgins, who did a bunch of the other painted covers. And there's nothing on the other side of it. It's literally just this poster. I think it's really fantastic myself. It's one of my favorite things that I came across while trying to complete this set. So moving on, we're not too much further along, folks. So I won't keep you much longer. But one of the things that Marvel did was they did these hardcover annuals every year, every Christmas time. Most of the time they would include, or a number of times they would include adaptations of the movie. So all 6 issues of, or all 4 issues of the movies were included in there. Other times they took selected issues. And I would dare to say that some of them included one-offs that were not US one-offs that were not printed in the UK. I'll get to that in a minute, the ones that I think. But here we go. This one here, annual number 1 includes issues 1 through 6. This includes Day of the Dragon Lords, issues 13 and 14 of the UK comics, issues 13 and 14, Day of the Dragon Lords and Sound of Armageddon. It also has some interviews and an Empire preview in there. Again, really cool covers. I just really, there's nothing special inside. It's the covers that I think are really neat, like Luke and his very stylish poncho. Everybody likes it. Here we've got, what's that?
And a red lightsaber.
And a red lightsaber. Here we've got, this includes the Empire Strikes. These things were also treated terrible. It's really hard to find these things in good condition. I've been through a number of these over the years, and some of them are still not in the greatest of condition. But like these kids over there just beat the crap out of these books. So for me anyway, it's been really hard to find really nice copies. I have acceptable copies of some of these. I have really great versions, and then I have some real dogs. Anyway, Empire Strikes Back over here on the left. That includes the adaptation of the film. This one here in the middle includes the issue 50, which was the Crimson Forever. That sort of annual that we had over here. Or actually it was number 50 over here in America. That big 3-part comic that they did that brought back Han Solo in a flashback. And then it also includes a one-off issue called The Dreams of Cody's Son Chill Day, which is just a weird Lando issue. The one over here on the right reprints Death Probe, which Luke is attacked by a gigantic probe droid. Not in any salacious way, but he's attacked by this death probe. And then it also includes what we know as issue 48, the third law, the banking planet issue. But again, cool cover that I really like. This includes on the right, or left rather, that includes the Return of the Jedi adaptation. Here in the middle, this is a massive one. This is one that's in really horrible shape for me, but it's still got a decent cover. It includes the Empire and Jedi cover adaptations. And then over here on the far right, great cover, terrible condition. This reprints just prior to Return of the Jedi stories, Chantus of the Stars and the Big Khan. This one here, the return of this with the Ewoks, this includes annual number 3, what we know as annual number 3, a really strange issue called The Apprentice. It was drawn by Klaus Janson, who did Batman comics, I think. I'm sure some people did a bunch of Batman comics over here. And it also included Ewoks issue 1. The next one is the Ewoks annual. This is a really unusual one. This includes 2 issues from the Ewoks comics and 2 semi-illustrated stories. So it just includes a few pieces of art within a text story that were never published anywhere else until 2018. I'll talk about that later. So here again, we have these pinups. This was another unusual aspect of these UK comics. So different art than we're used to seeing over here. That none of these were really used over here, to my knowledge. They're just little pinups. They were just extra pages that this guy Tony DeZuniga drew. Really great one here on the left. I really like that one. The one in the middle, not so hot. The one on the right includes that little icon there of Princess Leia in the middle. And that was later used as the back cover for the archive edition book that was published by IDW back in 2015. So that was a neat pull. But you can see he does some pretty good likenesses. He does, it's clearly his stuff. And it's got a style to it. And some of it's really pretty good, in my opinion. Here's one last one with him. Not the best Chewbacca in the world, more like the Wolfman. They really did, these covers really portrayed Chewbacca as a very violent character. And then you get into other things like these little photo feature things. So they would just stick a picture in there and put some little content underneath. And they had some cool ads over there too, ads and contest things. So just to give you an idea of some of those ads and contests that I was telling you about earlier. Unusual artwork that you don't see everywhere. Palatoy ads. I'm not sure what this is here. Like what this Tusken Raider down there at the bottom. I don't know if that's supposed to be a mask or something. I don't know if Palatoy did masks. Huh?
Halloween.
Think it's okay. Yeah, it's probably yeah. I just didn't know the Palatoy had anything to do with this. And then of course a bootleg lightsaber ad too there. They also started getting into a little bit of the early EU over there. They made a little glossary, and there's a map of the Death Star, the map of the death of the trench, and so forth. I can't really read what that says up there, but laser cannons. They've got a little. So that's it for the Marvel UK comics. That's what I have. The next thing that I'm going to show you guys is not from my collection. But I thought these were pretty good. These are from France. So these are a lot of these are variations of US covers, or panels of art within US comics. All these covers were later reprinted in a book done by Bowman's Green, just with these covers inside of them. So there are a number of them. So just kind of unusual covers. Again, this goes up to the Stenos issues 71, 72 or something like that. And then we get into the Lian Huana Hua. It's a Chinese bootlegs. So here we have Yoda. This is Yoda over there on the far right-hand side. That's the Chinese version of Yoda. And Michael brought a few of these today. So after I volunteered to do this, I went online and I knew that the Wild Space thing on the left had been done, and that incorporates all of the Devil World stuff. It incorporates all of the 4 New Adventures and the World of Fire. So it just includes all the stories, and that was published by Dark Horse originally. And I guess they put that Legends banner on it at some point, but it includes all the stories. All right, well, that's fine, well and good. But then I thought I saw this other one here on the right-hand side that was published by Marvel just a couple years ago, maybe 2017 or 2018. That includes all the covers, all the stories, all the pinups, all the contests, all the weird art inside of it. And I thought, what the hell am I doing this for? Everything is in there. It's 750 some pages long. So it's this monster. You have it, Virgil? You're shaking,
I
it.
just know about them omnibus.
Yeah.
They're huge.
You got that one?
Yeah.
Is it like huge, thick, 750
All those
pages?
Marvel.
It's insane. And so I'm like, well, this is, so I feel kind of silly, but this was my little presentation for you guys today.